Welcome to Business Focus. Today I am joined again by Gavin Houchell, Director of the Acquire Group, because we want to talk about what to do if you think you want to become the boss. If you want to step up, if you're in middle management, you want to go to that next level inside of your company, how do you make sure that is the right decision and how do you make it happen? So to tell me all about that, to tell us all about that, Gavin, welcome back.
Thanks, Brendan.
All right, let's talk about becoming the boss. So to kick off with, how do people actually understand the roles they think they want?
Yeah, this is a big area to discuss, and absolutely, everyone should focus on their growth and development to perhaps become the boss one day. But equally, some will make it, some won't, and many, many more will decide along the way that perhaps that's not the right outcome for them and it's not what they actually really want to do.
But how do they identify that or understand the role? Like, so they're at, I don't know, let's say they're head of finance and they think they want to be the CFO. How do they actually get their head around what that job really is? Like, how can a business enable them to get their head around what that next step looks like and therefore what gaps they need to fill to get there?
Absolutely. And look, I think being cognizant of some people, if they turn around and said, I want to be the CEO for McDonald's, there's a few steps before perhaps you get there if you are, head of finance in Woolworths today, for example. But I think it's identifying, I always say to people, what are your superpowers? So what are you famous for? What does your current leader, what does your partner, what does your friends and family? So what are the sort of reference points, either anecdotally or formally in perhaps performance reviews, that actually talk about what makes you you and what makes you special? And then starting to think, how do you start to test and build those new experiences and capabilities? We touched on capabilities in our last catch up. And I think it's being cognizant of those. So for some, that might be maybe by inadvertently their boss in their current firm moves on. Do they step up? That might be earlier. It might be sooner than they expected, but take that leap of faith. But I think it's in some respects doing that in a controlled fashion. For others, it might be, I recently sat down and interviewed a HR director who moved from the HR director to leading operations and customer.
Okay.
So it was a pivot to build that. And what we're really looking for when we're talking about talent and leadership development is, how do people grow their capability?
It seems there that what you're saying though is potentially, do you want the job you think you want? Because you have to understand what you're good at before you can kind of make that call. I also think that in a more sort of fundamental way, often you look at someone in a role and you don't really know what their role is. Like, I mean, my family genuinely don't know what I do for work. I think most of the people in this office think that I just do podcasts, which is absolutely fair because that's all they see me doing. But, fundamentally, it is hard to understand what someone's workday looks like. Like, you unless you're shadowing them, you can't know. And I guess that's kind of serving up potentially the solution, right? Is if you think you want a role, can you shadow that person? Can you buddy up with them? Can the company prioritize giving you, sort of allowing you the space to do research and hands-on, I guess, to get hands-on knowledge of what the role you think you want actually is. Absolutely.
And I think that's a really good point. Sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And you may try something for 3, 6, 9 months and then say, that's not for me.
No.
Yeah, that's not for me. And again, this is all part of one's leadership journey. So it's back to that. It shouldn't be a measure of success or failure. It should be about, so some people, as I think I mentioned last time, are comfortable in their current capacity, and that's okay also. You need those workhorses.
Yeah.
But other people are super curious, thirst for knowledge, want to experience different things, and they may wear 4 hats within a single organization before coming back to saying, I found my happy place. I want to move back to X, or I want to move into Y. Just picking up on your point around shadowing, I think that's a really smart way. If you think about building capability and building experience on a leadership journey, how do you do that in a safe place? Now, clearly, trying to change job function, change sector, and change organization is pretty much nigh impossible. We are not paid when we're on our talent quest to find people that want to make those quantum leaps, because the risks are too high for both sides and may not set the person up for success. But bridging that gap on that leadership journey where perhaps job shadowing, so they get to experience. So maybe that's your next quest next week, Brendan. Get somebody that follows you for a day a week, and that's something I've been banging on for many years to my clients around what I call 20% time. which effectively means, so let's imagine you've been an expert in your job for the first 1-2 years, but you've got a thirst for something new. I'm pretty certain, unless your your role is director of first impressions, greeting every customer that walks through your office, most people can probably get their job done in 4 days a week. So that 20%, that day number 5, what could you do with that time? How can you go and shadow someone that you are curious around their job? And it might be that you do it for 6 weeks, you might do it for 6 months, but it gives you a taste and experience from a different perspective. So job shadowing, doing the 20% time. A stage further is probably job swaps, where you and I swap jobs.
That could be chaotic.
We'll give it a go. But that, again, that's another way where it's not forever. But we're not, with all due respect, both our professions, we're not doing open heart surgery.
No.
So what can really go wrong if I need to back you up or you need to back me up?
I feel like your business might go under, but other than that, I think so. In a past life, I set up we called it, I think, like an intern program, but it wasn't really. I mean, what we had is we had a service desk, and we wanted the people coming in, the level 1 engineers or support technicians, to understand that there was a path for them in the business. So year 1 was a certain amount of time across 5 or so different specialist roles. It could be voice, engineering, systems, whatever. And then year 2, they chose a path, and then they went deep on whichever one they had the most interest in. And it was basically shadowing in year 1. But what I found probably two things with that. One is it works well when there's a big pool of people that you can just take one at a time out to do that. At the next level up, where there's really a specialist, and then probably by themselves or maybe one of 2, you take that resource out, it has a bigger impact. And if the other person's on annual leave 4 weeks a year, they've got some sick leave, say, a week a year, it's just harder to do. And probably the only other risk that I saw was in that second year, when it was less just shadowing, just watching, which is easy enough. There's no impact on the person they're watching. The second year, when it was more, let me show you something, that did impact productivity, and so there has to be a real buy-in from the business to go, we accept that, we're catering for that, we think it's worth it, because the alternative is that we have a high turnover, we have this entirely other overhead. And so I don't know, I think there's just a real need for planning around the fact that will have an impact. There's a saving to it. There's a very strong business case to do it, but it's real. Yeah,
and picking up critical mass, and for a 300-400 seat organization versus back to sort of a smaller business, that can be more challenging. But I think there's other mechanisms that can help people become the boss. So we talked about internal, but there's external support as well, and that might be education. I'm a massive advocate for mentoring and coaching. I think for everyone, it's invaluable, for particularly those that have risen through middle management and looking to go into executive and eventually may want to be the CEO one day with their firm or with an organization. That mentoring and coaching is critical.
Can you talk to me about that then? So you're mentoring or coaching someone in exactly that scenario, GM, 50 to 200 seat business. They don't want to be in the same role forever. How does that conversation start, and where does it lead?
Yeah, I think the first thing I should highlight is the delineation between mentoring and coaching.
Okay.
So mentoring with an external mentor, what I call an unbiased. So there's absolutely large enterprise clients that have fabulous internal mentoring programs, but it's your boss's boss or a boss in another department. So it's not as safe as somebody that is an external party that is purely there to focus on you, and you can have those robust conversations which may be confronting or reality internally don't happen. So when I talk about an unbiased mentor, I mean somebody that's there for you but safe space. So the mentee and mentor relationship's a really important one, in the sense of their role. Typically, a mentor might buddy up with a mentee for 12 months. And it's less frequent interaction, and what their role is they're not necessarily. So we talk about who has advised them to do this. They're not accountable to the advisor. So if you said to me, got one of my guys, they really want to have some external perspective, that mentor is not accountable to you. It's purely the mentee, and they will hold and really the custodian of the relationship is the mentee. What are the objectives they're trying to do? What are some of the challenges they're facing, and how can that most times mature mentor provide some counsel and advice and guardrails? They're not solving the problem. A coach, an executive coach, is typically paid for engagement But if I was coaching if I was an accredited coach, coaching one of your staff members, and we might have a defined objective. Mm-hmm. They're either high performance or it's remedial. But we're trying to fix a problem, and it typically is more intense. So it might be a meeting every week, every second week, and it might be 6 sessions, and then the engagement is finished.
Okay.
So there are coaching techniques that take place in mentoring, but they are 2 different services that organizations use, and sometimes used in tandem, but different objectives.
So I guess we're probably talking more about the mentoring here, right? Where it's about, there isn't a problem per se, but we want to help you maximize or reach your potential.
Correct.
So in those situations, how much of it is about helping people get past, maybe it's imposter syndrome, but some sort of mental blocker they've put on themselves that it's so hard to envision themselves taking that next step versus actual skills gaps? Or is it typically both?
Well, I think it's exactly what I touched on of having an external, it's wood for the trees. So when we're all challenged in business and we've got a problem, we're all under the same roof thinking the same way. Whereas a mentor will pose a very almost obscure question or something completely different to the mentee that will make them think differently, and then take them from what I call an inside out to an outside in view. So that does allow, hopefully with the right traits and desire, because clearly it can be confronting. If someone holds the mirror up and says, I've observed you're always negative about this leader that you're having challenges with, how are you going to change that mindset? What outcome are you looking for? So it's the questions you ask, and equally how then the mentee will then take on the actions to at least attempt to make progress. So I talk about being bold and brave. And another way, just touching off coaching and mentoring, being bold and brave, the perfect scenario internally is, can you get yourself, if you can't go and do a job swap, can you get yourself involved in a project that traverses the whole organization? And that might be, again, it might be that 20%, that 1 day a week. Say to your current boss, hey, for the next 8 weeks, I want to work on this project. Can you give me that space? And then you're suddenly working with leaders that you know them at the kitchen, but you don't actually know what they do until you sit down and talk to them.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's been one of the probably most enjoyable things for me in my role, my 8 months here at First Focus so far, is we have these IQPs, quarterly priorities, and typically they bring together a lot of people from a lot of departments. There's always a clear owner, but there's a team they work with. The last one I owned was our onboarding process, new clients. And so I'm working with service delivery, the transitions manager. I'm working with GMs from our pods, which are sort of standalone units that look after a subset of clients. What I knew before that, what I know now is entirely different. I understand people's roles. I understand, where they add value. I understand, clear delineation between ownership and responsibility. So I totally agree. It's that concept of cross-departmental buy-in that's huge if you want to go up. You can't just silo yourself and think you're going to get ahead.
Subject matter domain or
How real is it that, because I often hear people say, look, if you want to get ahead, you just need to go somewhere else. Like if you want to get a decent pay bump and you really want to sort of fast track your move up the ladder, is that an attitude that still kind of prevails? And is that, if it does, is that because the lack of, I guess, developmental focus or paths created for people inside, sort of mid-market businesses?
Yeah, I think picking up on the mid-market, I think it comes back to what attracts people to work at an organization. Sometimes it's shiny badge and the gimmies. A lot of the time, once you start to mature in middle management, you realize that actually the problems the business is there to solve, or the leader you're working for, is the glue. And we all have good parts and crap parts of our job. That's life. Yeah. But there's a degree of, if you work with a leader that truly believes and displays the behaviors, which is, my job is to make you more employable. 2 things occur there. Firstly, you will become more employable because they're rope feeding, they're giving you opportunities, they're challenging you. Yeah. The flip side, the return favor on that is tenure tends to be in a better position because people go, this is good, I'm being stretched, I'm being developed in maybe a cross-functional team and so forth. But equally, there's probably a confidant relationship that comes with a leader. Not everyone's going to expect that. And as a leader, don't expect everyone to come to you, where they will actually have a conversation, say, I think it's time to leave. This is what I'm after. And the right answer might be, it is time for you to leave. And what we call good leavers. And then you get into dialogue around Boomerangs, where 2-3 years later, they come back and work for your firm with more skills, more experience, because of the way you've handled that journey.
Yeah, that's it. If you don't have the right pathway for them, but you really rate them and their skills, and you can kind of paint a picture of what they could do and the best way to do it. And I think that comes back to that. I mean, it's essentially an internal mentor, right? Like that's really just acting in their best interests. Really. I remember when I was younger, one of my first jobs actually was with the Queensland Chamber of Commerce back in the day. And I had a boss there, and I don't know how we got in the conversation, but I said something. I was young and stupid, but I just said something along the lines of, what if you found out I was going somewhere else? He said, I'd do everything I could to support you because I think you'll do great in whatever role you go to, and I'd be proud that I'd helped you get there. And I was like, oh my God, you're so mature and growing up, and this is like, it's not a you versus me or you're doing something against me. It's like I'm in your camp and I want you to win, and it just fundamentally changed how I saw that relationship. And he is a great manager, but so essentially he was doing what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so let's kind of bring it back to the core conversation here is you want to step up, you want to be the boss, whatever the boss is, 1 step up, 2 steps up, whatever. Can you give us just, I guess, the fundamentals, what you can practically apply from here to start to make that happen or to realize that goal?
I think first thing is look within your own 4 walls. You turn up 3, 4, 5 days a week into your current environment. So what are the opportunities? So leadership growth, it's a challenge, but ultimately you've got to be the custodian of that. So you can't just say to boss, well, fold your arms. What's my next promotion or what's my opportunity? You've got to then come with solutions, and that comes back to, well, what are you passionate about? So back to things such as what are your superpowers? So what are the things that you would like to enhance or perhaps drop in your role and pick up something new? Maybe suddenly you want to understand how the customer journey works or the marketing function works, and you're currently working in operations or finance or HR. So how do you first of all look in your own 4 walls for that opportunities and be bold and brave and bloody ask or go and sit next to the chief technical officer if you're in HR and say, hey, I want to understand what your function does. Can I spend some time with you? Most people that are good leaders will embrace the people that pose those questions.
Yeah.
So I think that's the first thing. The second is clearly then thinking about a formal development plan, because that may not be formal, it might be informal. And how do you bridge that? But also set appropriate expectations. So how are you going to measure that success, and what does that look like? So that might be putting in a plan at 3 and 6 and 9 months where you are then ready for an internal promotion, or equally you then start to think about that move externally. But again, back to that, if you can have a relationship with your current organization, there will be a point in time where not everyone's going to work for the firm for 30 years, and perhaps nor should.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of an old school approach. My father-in-law worked for the same place, day 1 to last day, same place. It's very unusual now, I would say.
Well, if you look at large enterprise clients, particularly in the technology sector, they now have teams that purely manage alumni talent, with the benefit of them either going to suppliers, to customers, back to themselves. So the whole ecosystem of talent. And, I guess we could go off on a real tangent here in terms of the education system. Well, the world is changing so rapidly. The construct of employee and employer is not going to look the same in 10 years' time.
The idea that you can train yourself once at 20 and be set for life is probably not at all relevant in the near future.
I think the futurists are saying we're all going to have, when we all live to 120, the next generations, we're going to have 5 to 7 career paths in our working lives.
Wow. Okay.
I'm not, thank God. But
I don't think I want to be a part of that. But it's really interesting what you're saying there. What that whole sort of managing, company alumni, where essentially we are creating a role at the moment. We have a role created in my team actually, which is a community manager role, and that's actually forming part of that. Is how do we stay in touch and keep engaged with former employees, either to hopefully get them back when they've gone to the next stage and we have a role for them, but also just to sort of, I guess, work together, have that network. There's a whole bunch of ways it pans out, right? But it's going to be a real key focus. So, okay, nice. Look, I think unless you want to add anything more there, is there anything else that you want in terms of those steps that just sort of fundamentally, you got to be bold, you got to understand your 4 walls. You've actually got to make sure that you go out and you ask the question and you look to create the movement for yourself. You can't just wait for it to happen. Anything else that we should take as a tangible step for people watching?
Yeah, so just replaying what you just said there in my mind. I think they're fundamentals. I think if I could applaud everyone who's tuned in today to listens to our pearls of wisdom, I would applaud everyone to to take an active step in this area. So that might be, well, if you wanted to, what are your 2 commitments in the next 6 months that you want to focus on your leadership growth development?
Yeah, I like that.
What are those? Put a diary marker in for the next, middle of the month for the next 6 months.
Yeah.
And test yourself and hold yourself accountable of what have you done in that 4 weeks, in the 8 weeks, at the 12-week mark that you feel that you've experienced. Because that might answer some questions. That may give you the satisfaction to say, I'm okay with where I'm at. Or, hey, I've had an epiphany and actually now I'm putting my hand up for an internal promotion the next window that pops up.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point too. I think it's okay to not want to take that next step. And I think we have to make sure that we're not glorifying that that's the only acceptable option, right? Because for a lot of people, I don't know, there's other priorities, and that's absolutely okay. I think the other thing there is, I like what you said about setting those markers, because for me, it doesn't matter if you're planning for retirement, you've got an event you've got to manage, whatever, you set the end date and you work backwards. And so understanding what 3 years from now, what would perfect look like? Where do you want to be? 5 years, 10 years, whatever, right? And that may actually align with your retirement plan. If there's a budget goal in mind, you need to earn X, whatever, that's another way of framing it. But look, I think probably the key thing for me today from this, because a lot of the stuff you're talking about, I think First Focus does well, but I'm certainly going to add some talking points to my monthly and quarterly one-on-ones that I don't currently have, because I need to be asking those questions. Where do you want to be going and how do I help you get there? And like you say, be honest about whether I think that path exists here. And if it doesn't, that will actually help me understand that I guess that churn risk, losing that person at some point, and planning for what's best for them and how I make sure we don't lose productivity as a result of that.
Free partnership, absolutely.
Yeah, which I like. Cool. Okay, well, we're going to leave it there. But again, if you've got any questions around how to make that next step up in your role, you're very welcome to reach out to Gavin on LinkedIn. Of course, he is the director of the Acquire Group. Thanks for watching. And if you've got any ideas for a topic, something you'd like us to talk about on a future show, please reach out to me on LinkedIn as well, Brendan Ritchie. That's Ritchie. Thanks for watching. See you next time.